Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Christopher Gustafson from my very own department. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Um, we are so glad you could join us and share a little bit about your work and your interests. So my first
Thank
question,
you.
yeah,
Sorry.
all good, all good. So my first question to you is, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, including a fun fact?
Sure. So I am, I guess, pretty homegrown. I grew up on a farm about 40 miles north of here. Uh, went to a very small, by most people's standards, high school with my graduating class at 18 students in it, and then came to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Started out in political science, but switched to agricultural economics fairly quickly. Uh, and so did my undergraduate degree here. Um, I spent a year in Italy after undergrad and then went to grad school at the University of California at Davis for my PhD. Um, and then after 3 years in Tanzania doing a postdoc, um, came back here to start this job. Fun fact. Um, one that I have used a number of times is that while I was in Tanzania, working on a project that included um, mostly veterinarians, they got asked to help diagnose some skin problems that giraffes were having in the nearby national park. And so they needed to take samples of the affected area, which required darting them and tripping them. I got to help be a giraffe tripper,
Oh my
which
God.
involved taking a big rope in front of giraffes who had been darted and trying to get them to fall over.
Wow. That is definitely a very,
Weird.
I don't know, weird is what I would say. It's very unique in terms of experiences to have.
Fair enough.
For sure, for sure. And if I did appreciate your pun in there about being pretty homegrown, because I know if many of us, many of the people who are watching this video must be familiar with your research, Chris, a lot of which is with looking at homegrown values. So, and I am a person who does like a lot of puns.
Excellent.
Yes, exactly. Uh, my next question to you is, what sparked your interest in, behavioral economics, health economics? Was there like a person, a moment in time, or anything? Or those
I
giraffes?
did the giraffes do it. Um, I, I think I just discovered the literature. Um, I first discovered the experimental economics literature. The year that I spent in Italy, I had a sort of research fellowship um, there and ended up spending a lot of my time just reading journal articles, and so discovered the experimental economic literature during that time period, and given the close ties between experimental economic methodologies and behavioral economic research, given that you can sort of generate counterfactual data, put people in sort of decision making scenarios that you wouldn't be able to control variation in real world settings. It was a lot of I, that the experimental economics literature just kind of naturally led to the behavioral economic literature, uh, and so I think that's how I came across that, and just found it to be very, very interesting, and appreciated the uh, richness and complexity that
Mhm.
integrating psychology and other social science perspectives into economic research provided.
I always think of this as I am very interested in those two areas as well, as you know, and I've just always found that looking at experiments and looking at behavioral economics just has personally made economics more real for me. I don't always have to, in my mind, think about, Homo economicus.
Fair
And
enough.
yes, exactly. So I completely see where you're coming from, and for our audience, especially the graduate students or the undergrads or the early career researchers, the key is to read more papers. That is um,
Yes.
that is key for sure. Um, I think you did talk about your professional trajectory, and you've been in different places, done different types of work. So, what do you think you have learned from this journey?
That's lots of things. I guess it depends on what sort of message you want to derive from it.
That's right.
Um, I think one thing the first thing that came to mind is as you kind of alluded to, there was some jumping around in topical areas. In graduate school, I was working on consumer valuation of wine and wine attributes using experimental economic
Hmm.
valuation methods in California. And then, due to some sort of uh, non professional reasons, I ended up in Tanzania and there worked with pastoralist and agro-pastoralist communities on livestock health and human nutrition issues. And then the position here at the University of Nebraska Lincoln is related to behavioral economics and health behaviors. And so, there were a number of different literatures that I had to familiarize myself with.
That's right.
Um, and I think that for the sake of efficiency, it would have been better not to have had to get familiar with all those different literatures. So, um, you know, obviously, not everyone has the choice to stick in one area um, from the start. But you know, if you know that you're really passionate about something and think that that is going to be a sort of consistent theme or a consistent interest moving forward, positioning yourself to be able to start working on that when you're a graduate student probably would make it easier later on. So you're not, learning two new areas after you've finished grad school. Uh, that being said, I think there is, uh, you know, very valid reasons for,
Hmm.
or, that being curious and wanting to expand into other areas is a very legitimate thing as well. But, I think given sort of the focus on productivity and in the research realm and higher education these days, um, setting yourself up to be in a position where you can be efficient is has value.
Yep, I see where where you're going with that. And I think the one of the, like, if I might kind of like summarize what you said, is like having the curiosity, but also having that consistent theme can keep our, the gray cells alive in our brain, but at the same time make sure that, we are productive. Because I was having another conversation in these interviews, and I was saying that, our profession is very, very visible in some sense. And so having that productivity definitely kind of gives you that visibility in the profession. So, for example, you're definitely right there. What is one of the most fulfilling aspects of your career or your current professional role?
Um, again, I think there are a number of things that I could talk about, but I think helping graduate students, mentoring graduate students,
Hmm.
helping them sort of get the skills they want and get places they want to go is very fulfilling. Um, I like working with students a lot and having the opportunity to talk about ideas and things of that nature. So that's certainly one element. I also just like research a lot. So anytime that I can be thinking about research or doing research is time that I'm pretty happy.
Yes.
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, for enough, in our department, you have been the graduate coordinator for quite a few years. And in that sense, you're probably the first person that potential and new incoming graduate students have contact with. And, I know we have talked about a lot of things. I guess we have not talked about the fact that you like, you work with a lot of students and that, you enjoy working with them. So that's pretty nice that, they had an opportunity to interact with you first before interacting with other people in the department. And, this.
Nice for me.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And if people don't know already, our department is small, smallish, smallish. It's not small, I think, but then we do have a good culture. So I think that graduate students are not unhappy in our department. So I think these things really help. So great. Thanks for shouldering the burden of the graduate admissions committee for as long as you did, Chris. It's a
Certainly.
lot of
I
work.
have rotated off, so I've got a bit more free time now.
Yes, for that research that you were talking about.
Exactly.
All of that stuff. Um, can you describe one project you're currently working on that you find particularly interesting? And is there something unexpected that you have learned from it? Something really fascinating?
Um, yeah, that is a great question. I think a theme that is run through a number of recent projects that I've worked on, and I guess depending on sort of how you group projects, like if a grant typically comprises multiple smaller projects,
That's right.
um, but you might talk about the grant as the overarching project. So
Mhm.
anyway, a common theme running through research I've been doing is um, sort of the complexity of the product environment that consumers face when they're making food choices. And a lot of what I've been working on has to do with taking a nutritional angle to that decision process or the choices that people are making. Um, Traditionally, the methods that have been used to experimentally study consumer behavior have used very or relatively simple choice environments
Mhm.
featuring two products at a time. Typically for choice experiments, you know two, three, four products at a time for valuation experiments where people are bidding on items. But that really isn't reflective of the market environments that people face when they go out to a supermarket to buy food. And sort of despite the assumptions that are commonly made that people, if information is freely available or products are freely available to consider, that people will consider them.
Right.
Um, that kind of ignores or that does ignore the time and cognitive costs of actively thinking about each and every product.
Hmm.
Um, so I have been, working to try to look at sort of the agency that consumers have in shaping the choice environment they face when they are faced with a lot of products.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that there are a number of interesting things that have come out of, some of these studies in this domain, including, for instance, the fact that people's belief um, shape the products that they choose to look at. So if people, believe that this set of ready to eat breakfast cereals is healthier than this other set, they're more likely to look at the set that they believe is healthier. Taste is even more predictive of the types of products that they're choosing to look at, even more so than health. But those sorts of the beliefs that people are bringing to the product environment shape to a certain extent the products that they end up looking at. And so if they have inaccurate beliefs to start with, that is going to end up showing up in the product sets that they choose from. And so and that, taking a sort of policy lens to that,
Mm-hmm.
package-based nutrition labeling might not have an effect if people are only looking at products that they believe from the start sort of fit their definition of what constitutes a healthy product. They're not necessarily going to see products that challenge those beliefs because their beliefs are guiding what they look at from the beginning.
Right, right. No, and this is a very, very important point, and it kind of highlights the role that behavioral economics and experimental economics can play in understanding these kinds of decision settings. Uh, uh,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
hmm I think it's super cool, but then, I'm fairly biased, like leaning into the behavioral terminology, so to speak.
Fair enough.
Awesome, awesome. Now, my next question is that, we all have areas where we can potentially improve. So is there something that you are working on, some area that you'd like to address something?
That's a good question. Um, I think um, I mean I don't know that it's specifically uh, related to any like the research process or writing. I would I would like to make myself be maybe more ambitious in terms of uh, I guess where I'm sending manuscripts,
Mhm.
applying for funding, things like that. I think that there's value in getting yourself or getting your work in higher placed or higher more esteemed outlets,
Mhm.
but um, but it also takes more time,
For sure, for
and that
sure.
trade-off is one that I've maybe struggled with.
But
Um,
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, Chris, because I think if anybody were to look at your professional profile, it's in some sense very, very unique because you publish in both disciplinary as well as in interdisciplinary journals, and that by that association, given the nature of work that you do, your work just comes in like in front of so many different types of people, which in many cases, many of us may not have that opportunity. But I see your point. That's well taken. Yeah, I
I
understand where
mean,
you're coming from. Yeah.
and I guess it's not just submitting it to a higher ranked journal versus a lower ranked journal. It's also spending the time figuring out how to, rather than doing one experiment and publishing that, for some higher impact publications, you need to do multiple experiments that each of which targets a different hypothesis or a different angle on the particular question you're looking at.
Yeah.
And so figuring out that and planning for those multiple steps ahead of time is something that I have not uh, necessarily done, but would maybe like myself to try.
hmm
I have purposefully targeted publications in different fields because with a lot of work on sort of nutrition oriented decisions, I think it's valuable to try to get that work in front of other people who work on nutrition and not just economists.
Right.
who are working in the health domain. So certainly some of that has been purposeful, but I could try. I could try some different things in that domain.
Yes, and you raise a very important point because I think one of the, in the, if I might say, use that word like phrase, in the humdrum of research, of thinking, right, implementing, writing, coming, polishing a paper and all of that, sometimes these kinds of strategizing kind of get lost, or not lost, but they don't receive a lot of attention. But I think that a successful professional career in our line of work will require thinking about these things too. So I'm really appreciative of you actually talking about that. For sure. Um, Looking back, to your past work and interactions, if you could redo something, what would that be?
Another good question. I think that um, I wouldn't change the fact that I ended up in situations where I switched kind of the literatures I was working in um, multiple times. But if I had maybe had known that that was going to happen, I would have done a few things differently. That's not very helpful because it wasn't really and stuff that I anticipated happening. Um, Man, yeah, I feel like a lot of what has, a lot of the steps of my professional journey have been somewhat unanticipatable,
Hmm.
and they've all constituted learning opportunities, and I think maybe that is um, the thing that I've learned along the way, especially I think early in sort of my tenure in this job. There were times you know when before I'd really figured publishing out, or you know to the extent that I have now. Um,
Yes.
and it seemed more mysterious, or when I was trying to get research going and it sometimes felt like a struggle, or I didn't, you know, maybe didn't understand it as well as people that I was comparing myself to did. But when I sort of hit upon the idea that I could frame it to myself, another behavioral economics callback, as a process of learning,
Uh-huh.
rather than like a static point in time where I needed to know everything. I felt a
Yes.
lot better about thinking of myself as still learning things and still figuring things out, but in a productive way where, I might not know this thing now, or I might not understand exactly how to frame this paper for this journal now, but I'm learning as
Hmm.
part of this process. And even if I don't get it this time, it's going to help me in the future. I feel like that
Absolutely.
reduced my stress a lot. Um, so I guess I wish that I had figured that out earlier, that I could frame the way I thought about the process in a way that would feel better.
We are taking the use of puns or jargon or nerdy language to a whole different level, because I was going to say what you're saying is that there's been path dependency and you've kind
Oh,
of figured stuff out. Though this is great.
yeah.
Um, Along this same vein, you know, looking back, what is something that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out as a young professional, which you would like to share with the early career scholars, junior scholars in our profession?
Another very good question. I mean, I think that the thing, what I just talked about,
Hmm.
thinking of things as a learning opportunity is certainly one thing um, that I would mention. Um, uh, I think that there are also maybe different ways to a successful career, or different pathways to a successful career. I think that um, you've got some people who just aim for, what would be considered the top journals in our
Right.
profession,
Right.
um, and aim everything they do for that type of publication. You've got other people who, aim for that type of journal at times, but also, recognize that there are contributions to be made in other journals that um, might not require as much. I don't know. I don't know what word I want to
Revising,
use here.
revising,
Revising,
resubmitting.
or very specific construction of uh, problem,
That's
if
right.
that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So I know that there are some people who really want to get everything that they do in those top journals who are kind of like combing the higher, the general econ literature for
Mhm.
an idea that could be taken and applied in a more applied setting, and then trying to publish that in the American Journal of Agricultural Economics or something, that journal.
Mhm.
Um, but that, in my mind, there's a trade-off between that approach and an approach where the researcher themselves are trying to identify, um, new and interesting questions within it that might be overlooked or that might not fit in what researchers who are publishing in the American Economic Review or the Quarterly Journal of Economics are thinking about, because
Right.
it's a different question, but in an applied setting might be very relevant, even if
Mhm.
um, it might not have, it might need more empirical evidence before you would apply it in a theoretical setting, um, that would
Mhm.
that would interest those journals. Or, I think that there are a lot of very important findings that are generated in economics that don't make their way into the types of journals that people working in nutrition read, that are really important ideas and that I think would be good for them to be exposed to. Um,
Right.
and so, you know, I guess I would encourage people to recognize that there are different, to a certain extent, as long as you're being productive, you may have more ability to define how you are productive than it might seem from the graduate student perspective.
Yes. This is a great point because there are so many ways. Like I thought early on that there was only one way to be professionally successful,
Yes,
to
so did I.
make my work meaningful to me as well as to the profession. But that's very far from the truth. And I believe that. Others, and clearly you do too. So I agree with you. That's a great point. And I think in some sense that repeating this and amplifying this kind of reduces a lot of pressure for like our graduate students or our early career scholars who might not feel as if just publishing is what they want to do.
Yeah.
Yep, that's great. This also does segue into one of my final questions for you is that looking ahead, what in your opinion are some of the topics or exciting developments to look forward in our field of experimental and behavioral economics in the future, the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it may sound like a bit of a broken record, but um, you know, in the general economics literature in the past 10 years or so, there's been an increasing amount of attention about rational inattention or incomplete
Mhm.
consideration, um, in complex environments. And um, so I think that is, that's likely to start showing up um, more in our field, I would guess.
Right.
obviously, I um, I have self-interested reasons for wanting it to show up in, or to be
For
interested in
sure.
showing up in our field as well, given that it is an area of interest for me. Um, yeah, I think, um, sort of branching off from that, the sort of complex environments and the increasing use of sort of digital retail by consumers, that both relates to how consumers deal with these complex environments. In stores, in physical stores, people are, kind of visually searching or going to the spot that they know the things they want are located in. In online retail, there are a host of tools that they can use to shape what they look at, including searching directly for a particular product, filtering options where,
Yes.
you can say, I only want to see products that are below, cereals below $5 a box, or only organic cereals, or only cereals that have less than 6 grams of added sugar per serving. All of these sorts of options that people can use to shape the products that they see. But at the same time, and I don't, I am less aware of there being sort of real world analogs to this at the moment. I think there, in those sorts of digital environments, there are other options that could be that retailers could use, and maybe if we did some research on it first, they would be more likely to adopt this, that have to do with sort of personalization of the retail environments to consumers' individual priorities or needs or
Right.
um, tastes. Um, so, I've started to do a little bit of research in this area in the health domain, looking at, if people, um, are invited to uh, sort of indicate what their top health priority is, and then you show them a customized set of products that are responsive to that health priority. Do they end up choosing? But they can see everything else as well, so they're not
Right.
forced to only see these limited set of products. Do they end up choosing healthier products than if, even if you prime them with that health priority question, but then they just go out into the vast array of products available in space, and sort of an initial research project in this area suggests that yes, they are much more likely to choose healthy products when you both when you tie a set of products that makes it easy for them to find something that's responsive to their health priority, um, to that health priority, versus even a situation where you are reminding them that they have these health priorities, but
Mm-hmm.
then they have to sort through the vast array of things that are out there themselves.
Right. Right. Fascinating. Fascinating. Excellent. So my last question to you is that, are you open to being approached by other researchers who want to collaborate with you and or just, have a conversation with you? And if yes, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to people if there's anyone who's interested in talking. Um, email is probably the best way, because my phone seems to think that every phone number that tries to call me that it doesn't recognize is spam, and so we'll
Oh.
send it directly to voicemail. There's probably a setting that I could change to make that not be the case, but there seems to be a lot of spam calls happening anyway. So anyway, but email is probably the best option, and I guess it's CGUSTAFSON6 at nebraska.edu. Now we just did the email switch over.
Oh, yeah, that's
Um,
right. That's right. That's
mm,
right.
but I think at unl.edu also would probably find its way here. So, um, I maybe I should say that again just to um, give people a chance to write it down if anyone has interest. So CGUSTAFSON6 at nebraska.edu or at unl.edu.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing a little bit about your research with us. It's fascinating and very, very interesting. Thank you so
I,
much for your time.
I, I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you, Samanti.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.